We're delighted to welcome Ann Ansah-Grant to the studio, a Toronto-based author, with her first book called Soaring Above the Flames. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the program.
Now, the description of this book is spiritual warfare.
Yes.
I'm dying to know what that's about.
Well, spiritual warfare, it basically sort of, you're operating under the premise of we're human beings, but we're also mind, body, and soul. And if there is sort of a spiritual aspect to us as human beings, there must be something that governs that. So basically the book talks about the human condition, but there's an interplay between the humans and the demons that sort of plague their lives and the angels that defend them. So it's sort of that sort of thing. And because, the word war is in it, it's got a lot of action in it. But it also has three very sort of tragic female characters that are basically struggling to come into their own power and purpose.
So, in a few words, give us the plot.
The plot is this. There is a jazz musician, she's basically a jazz legend, who in the prime of her career basically is brought down by a scandal that she gets involved in. And because of that, she basically wants to escape the media, the storm. She's lost basically everything. And she moves her family out to this place in the middle of nowhere. The book describes it as a star that's basically fallen from the sky, fallen from grace, and wants to go supernova without the whole world watching her demise. When they get to this rural town, they realize there's a certain faction of demons there that start to plague their lives and create all sorts of turmoil. But there are also these angels that are constantly trying to protect them. And it becomes a bit of a spiritual battle, a war in their lives.
Well, it seems somewhat of a departure from what we're used to seeing and reading about as contemporary Christian fiction.
Absolutely. It's not warm and fuzzy, that's for sure. I looked at it as spiritual warfare, and as such, I make no apologies for how outrageous some of the characters are, how difficult some of the topics that they deal with are. There's attempted sexual assault, there's drug addiction, there's alcoholism, there's violence in this book. I wanted to show basically the ugliness that can happen in the natural world and how the spiritual world can influence that.
The spiritual world in terms of religion? Or do you make a split here?
I don't like to use the word religion because I feel like this is a book that explores the human condition. And so, there are biblical references throughout the book, but this is one of those things that even if you were not of the Christian religion or the Muslim religion or any other religion, because it explores the human condition, things we all go through, I think that anyone can read this, particularly even if you were not of a particular faith. If you like fantasy novels, for instance, things with adventure and paranormal types of things, I think anyone can enjoy this book.
Would you draw a comparison or parallel maybe to C.S. Lewis and the Narnia series of books? When I read those and every Christmas through my childhood, and it took me years to realize what the Christian message was behind everything, because it was just a great story, but also in a fantasy realm.
Oh yeah, I watched it as a cartoon, as a child, and I didn't make that connection at all.
Aslan is God.
Yeah, Aslan is God. There's so many parallels in that story between what happens. I would say there are great similarities in the sense that you see a lot of references of things that happened biblically, things that happened during the movement of the Lord and of angels and of demons. You see a lot of references to that in the story. And it does take you a while also to make the connection, just like that. And I want it to be something that's thought-provoking, that makes people think.
So what was your message, or is your message, to the readers of this book?
Absolutely. I wanted them to see, part of the reason I made the characters so in such an extreme state of difficulty and so bereft was to show that no matter how you grow up, no matter how you were born, or whatever your circumstances are, you can overcome that if you have the will to do that. I wanted people to see that regardless of how powerless your situation is, particularly for women, when they've been in abusive situations, there is a way to rise above it and come into your own power, your own purpose, your own truth, and, be victorious in your life. Your beginning doesn't dictate your ending, basically.
So would you say that hope and choice are
Absolutely.
instrumental?
Absolutely. Hope, a very, very big one, I would say, is a big theme in the book. Hope. Not losing hope. Even when you are at the lowest point in your life, knowing that there is a way. I mean, you've hit rock bottom, all you can do is look up and move up if you're willing, basically.
Well, I use the word choice in that there are people who will say you choose every day when you get up whether
Basically.
you are going to be happy or not, regardless
Absolutely.
of what's going on.
Absolutely.
You choose that.
And that makes me think of a particular character. The main character is a very young girl. She's about 16 in the book, suffers from low self-esteem. Your typical teenager, but also is dealing with parents who have alcohol and drug addictions. And what's beautiful about this character is amidst all of this darkness, she has an inherent ability to say, this is going to be better. This is going to get better. This is the one character that embodies hope in the book. Regardless of her circumstances. So yes, hope plays a very, very big role in this story. And I think it's important, especially now as we look at the world, the things that are happening, particularly with young women, sexual assault. The statistics are crazy. And so I just wanted to show a character that says, no matter what, I can rise above this. No matter what, there's better on the horizon.
Is this an adult novel, young adult? Who's your ideal
I would
audience?
say young adult for sure. I wouldn't go lower than 15, because some of the topics are a little bit sensitive. I wouldn't necessarily give it to a child unless they're, quite mature, but I would say the cutoff would be about 15 years old. Beyond that, any age could enjoy this book.
When did you realize you were spiritual?
Well, my mother was always a very spiritual person, and I didn't understand it as a child. My father was not initially, but years later, probably by the time I was 7, he actually became a pastor. He actually felt a calling on his life, and so spirituality has played a role in my life since I was young.
So what comes after this?
I definitely left room at the end of the story for a sequel. So I am absolutely going to do a sequel to Soaring Above the Flames. And I also have another book that's currently in the works. Again, it's going to have a female character who is very powerful. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to writing this summer.
So are you hoping that young women, not necessarily younger than 15, will read this and sort of be able to take some strength from
Yes,
it?
and not just young women. I deliberately sort of made a range. There are 3 women in the house in this book. There's no male character in their home. The youngest is 16. She also has her mother, who's 32, and then her grandmother. And so I wanted there to be something for everybody in that age range. And you get to see their lives, their difficulties, and how they overcome that. It's not a happy ending for everybody, but there is a purpose to everything that happens in their life that's very inspiring to women, I believe.
What's your writing process? Because this is your first novel in print. I know you've published poems and magazines. You've written for magazines, right? But what was different about this? It must be almost overwhelming to begin with.
Well, it's something I've always wanted to do. I was one of those kids that always knew what they wanted to do. I wanted to write books. What was different about this process is I have a very unconventional style of writing. Most people outline their entire story. They kind of know the beginning, middle, and end. I just write. I get to find out what's happening in the story just like the reader finds out what's happening as they read along. I'm astonished as I'm writing it.
You didn't have a plot?
I do not outline my books at all.
You
I
just
don't know
sat
the
down
characters.
and started with the first sentence
I
and kept
literally
on going?
just started with the first sentence and kept on going. I didn't even know the characters' names, and the names would change as I'm going along. I would be writing and I would be like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. It's an exciting process when you don't know. I didn't know the end of the story until the end came. It's fantastic.
Have you ever heard of another writer writing like that?
No, and I'm pretty sure I couldn't teach workshops because that is the antithesis of what a writer is supposed to do. But I want it to be exciting for me.
Yeah,
I know.
I always thought writing would be like that.
Yeah.
And then I listened to authors talking about doing the outline, and that took X amount of time, and then sitting down 8 hours a day and taking breaks at the same time every day, working a 40-hour week, and I thought, wow, this is like a job.
Not at all. Everything about this was I didn't even have a schedule. I've got a very, I'll say excitable child, and so there was no schedule about it. I'd be in the bathroom with my laptop while everyone was asleep. I'd be at the kitchen table, peeling potatoes, and it was really one of those. I was this every woman who was determined, and writing this story, just around my life. Some of the experiences, things that would happen as I was writing would come into the plot.
Absolutely amazing. Well, I can't wait to read it, and I can't wait for the next one.
So tell people how they can get it.
They can get this currently on Amazon.com. You can order it either in paperback. You can get it by Kindle if you're one of those people who prefers technology. It will also be sold at the Knowledge Bookstore in Brampton. I believe that's 177. It's the Knowledge Bookstore. You can Google it anyways, and it'll be sold there at the end of this month if you're not one of those people who like to go online and purchase things.
So it's Soaring Above the Flames.
By Ann Ansah-Grant. Thank you very much for coming in and telling us
Thank
all
you
about
so much
it.
for having me. I appreciate it.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.